This is Pramod Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad, and we continue our exploration of the post-humanist intersection with environmentalism, the Anthropocene crisis, and what we are trying to trace as the post-humanist responses to these current conditions. In the previous modules, when we looked at post-humanist responses, we noted the fact that literature has been a major domain in which responses have been enunciated and articulated forcefully in several cases to the Anthropocene crisis, which is basically the climate change crisis. We have also noted that in fields such as bioart, performance art, there have been multiple forms of responses. Artists working with organic material, artists working with their own bodies, artists working with soil, animal life, plant life, what have you, to demonstrate the post-humanist view of the world as one made up of connections rather than separation, the linkages of the human and the non-human, the living and the non-living, the intertwining of environmental injustice with social injustice. We have also noted that the critical genealogies of posthumanism, which includes feminist responses to science and technology, which includes disability studies, animal studies, and plant studies, all of these have incorporated specific views of the Anthropocene, specific responses to the Anthropocene, for the simple reason that posthumanism's emergence as a critical school is almost coterminous with the rising consciousness about the climate crisis. So for people working with literature, by which I mean, of course, both novelists and literary critics, it has been a very clear index of how human perceptions of humanity has produced an environmental crisis, which means to say that the posthumanists have recognized that humans positioning themselves at the top of the hierarchy, an instrumental view of the world, their idea that we need to dominate and control the other forms of life, this view for many of the posthumanists, practically for all the posthumanists, is the key problem. So posthumanists draw attention to the fact that we are not autonomous coherent entities, we are connected identities, that our subjectivity is actually intersubjective, that what we think of as a human form is in fact an assemblage, a congeries of multiple life forms, and that we survive, we live, we eat, we have neurological, alimentary, orthopedic and other processes, all working because we have ingested sometime in our evolutionary past. We continue to retain some of these, and that's why these other life forms are a part of who we are. That's why even the non-living life forms, the inanimate, constitute us as in humans. So this is an important recognition that we are not separate. In the next couple of sessions, we will look at posthumanism, this particular theme of the Anthropocene, and the post-natural in contemporary literature. And cult works now, Paolo Bacigalupi's Wind-Up Girl, Becky Chambers' A Psalm for the Wild Built, Margaret Atwood's Mad Adam Trilogy, have become cults because they bring together the genre of climate change fiction and posthumanist literature to show that the posthumanist stance on the world, the planet and the other life forms is actually an environmentalist perspective. Now, climate change fiction is of many varieties, which includes the eco-apocalyptic, the ecotopian, and the industrial techno-disaster novel. Post-humanist Anthropocene fiction ensures that the human is not the center of action, but very often shows that wherever the human being is the center of action, it has resulted in environmental troubles, disasters, catastrophes. Instead, the post-humanist Anthropocene fiction shows the intersections of human and the non-human, the living and the non-living. Okay, so it refuses to give primacy to the human, and which is really our crucial dimension of post-humanist thought. So where there is a clear centering of the human, hierarchization of the human, you know that there has been, as a result of this, some kind of environmental catastrophe, degradation of the ecosystem, or what have you. And for posthumanists, therefore, the focus must be on the intersections of the human with the non-human, the living and the non-living. Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction also tries very hard to embrace a non-human perspective as well. So it tries to communicate the suffering and the subjectivity of the non-human as much as you can imagine the non-human. So if you look at Anthropocene fiction as varied as Jeff Vandermeer's The Strange Bird, if you look at the prose writings about the Peregrine Falcon, If I Were a Beast, and others, you will see this attempt to embrace, to present, to document the non-human perspective. You might recall an early Richard Shardik novel also about rabbits, which is obviously the key instance of an earlier text. Richard Adams's Shardik, I'm sorry, I got the name and the author mixed up, where the animal perspective is being foregrounded. So what does that mean? It means very simply that let's not think of the human and the human's suffering, the human's ambitions and aspirations as the key plot device of any novel. Let's start also thinking of the non-human and what role it plays. Let's think of the non-human as life forms with character, life forms with agency, life forms with the will to do things. Okay? Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction acknowledges the local. It focuses on the fact that a particular locality, a particular locale, is very often the scene of climate change consequences. So if you think of novels like The Nutmeg's Curse, which is not quite a novel, but if you think of Gun Island, the Ibis trilogy from Amitav Ghosh, the neo slavery novels of Isabel Allende, I'm thinking of Island Beneath the Sea, Agassiz, the homegoing Cynthia McLeod's The Cost of Sugar, several of these ones. The focus is very interestingly articulated. The novels show the transformation, the impact on a particular locality, a country in Africa, a village in Kerala, a suburban place, or an island in Mauritius or Bengal, but its refusal to foreground only the local. What do I mean by this? I am suggesting that the crisis in a particular locality, the crisis in a particular region is not originating in that particular region, which means to say that the locale or the locality may have the adverse impact of things that have happened elsewhere. And if you go back over your previous modules, I gave you the example from Marla Cohn's work on the Arctic and the Inuit people, where Cohn demonstrated that the toxins in their blood, in the blood of the Siberian Greenlander native people, those toxins don't ever originate in their regions simply because there are no polluting industries there. What's that supposed to mean? It means very simply that events happen somewhere, consequences are here. So Chernobyl affected animal and plant life in Sweden. It produced acid rain in England. So to say that we don't have any polluting industries and we are safe is actually an illusion. It's myth. As we have understood with Bhopal and Fukushima and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, geographical variation does not necessarily ensure geographical isolation. So you may be somewhere else, but that does not mean you won't be affected, which is why my example came from Marla Cohn's Silent Snow, a nod towards Rachel Carson's pioneering work Silent Spring. Marla Cohn discovered, and I'm repeating here, that the Inuits and the Siberian and the Greenlander people had large quantum of toxins in their blood, in their breast milk, in their bodies, although they did not produce any of those toxins in local factories. Tracing the origins of these toxins backward in time and place, Marla Cohn discovered that they, as in the toxins, originated in American industries. The toxins were dumped into the Atlantic. The toxins from the Atlantic got into the bodies of animals such as the beluga whales, the seals. The Inuits and the Siberians and the Greenlanders consumed the meat of these creatures and therefore assimilated the toxins. Now ask yourself this, what's local here? How is it local? The point I want to underscore here is post-humanist Anthropocene fiction may focus on a particular locality, but very often they present the events as occurring elsewhere or on a global scale, but which impacts local populations, local soil, water, etc. To reiterate the examples I mentioned before, almost all of Amitav Ghosh's fiction and non-fiction shows how globalizing activities and processes such as colonialism and slave trade, resource extraction, these affect the land, the people, and the resources. The neo-slavery novels do much the same thing. Post-humanist Anthropocene fiction addresses what people now call deep time. Deep time is a time before humanity appears, or at least in the very early stages of humanity's appearance on Earth. The post-humanist Anthropocene fiction always try to think in terms of what the planet was like during that time. And one of the early and classic instances of such a text is William Golding's The Inheritors. So you are asking yourself, where and how did the transformation of the planet occur? How was the planet before and how is it now? What is the genealogy of planetary crisis? What's the genealogy of climate disaster? But another kind of post-humanist Anthropocene fiction also exists, and that is when in the post-apocalyptic world, humanity is forced to return to a very basic non-technological life. What does that mean? In stories, novels such as Octavia Butler's or Margaret Atwood's, humanity discovers that the earth has become unlivable, and not only is it unlivable, they do not have the requisite technology, resources, including fuel, to live there. Some of you might remember even fictional feature films such as The Book of Eli, I Am Legend, which show cities devoid of people, devoid of products, devoid of consumer cultures, right? So the idea is also that humanity might have to return to a more basic life form. Basic is within quotes. And in many cases, such as Octavia Butler and Margaret Atwood, a new theology begins to emerge. A new way of spirituality begins to emerge. And in these cases, the theology and the spirituality are embedded in the earth. By which I mean, it is more connected, more grounded than what it used to be. So this is not about just having new gods and demons. No. It's about recognizing the connections of the human with the rest of the planet. It's to do with how humans, when forced to, can actually live with just nature and no technology. But that's not all. Post-humanist Anthropocene fiction also reimagines the city. So it's not just all about going back to nature. It notes that the city has somehow retained its spaces, but rethinking the relationship with water or air, which means let's not retain our traditional approaches to water, air, and the elements. Let's not think in terms of repeating the mistakes we have made. Okay? Given the posthumanism's interest lies in also emphasis on ecologies and ecologies which are interlinked, posthumanist Anthropocene fiction focuses on commonalities and relationalities, not just isolated pieces of life or forms of life. So, here are examples such as Larissa Lai's Saltfish Girl, which is a creation story of a deity, which centralizes the role of water in the origin stories of the land. It is about nations, of course, life forms, and it unsettles the idea of single origins and authenticity. Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction imagines different forms of ecological and anthropogenic. By anthropogenic, we mean human origin trauma and attempts to overcome this. So if you were to take a look at Don DeLillo's Zero K, disasters are coming. But if the disasters are coming, which threaten the planet and human life, technology comes to the rescue. Now this, if you might remember, is the transhumanist emphasis, right? The technology will rescue. And in Zero K, Don DeLillo's novel Zero K, a company offers to freeze your body and retrieve it several years later, by which time things would have presumably settled down. Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction calls attention to themes like species death and the post-natural. What does the post-natural mean? A term popularized by Rebecca Raglon and others. The post-natural is a wilderness constructed by the human. Now that might seem like a contradiction in terms. It sounds very much like a contradiction in terms. That you have the wild areas, the wilderness. But oddly, the wilderness has been constructed by humans. And when you say constructed by humans, you invariably think of the construction of anything by humans will involve technology. And an excellent example of a wilderness that has been produced for particular reasons, in this case commercial, would be Jurassic Park. Okay. Now, in the posthumanist Anthropocene fiction, this wilderness has to be protected and safeguarded, etc., etc. You see it in the new weird fiction of Jeff Vandermeer. I'm thinking principally here of the Southern Ridge trilogy, where the wilderness is the creation of a certain kind of conjunction, shall we say. It has become inhospitable to humans, but it's the result of the human global capital and technology. And you see this amplified in his later novel, Bone. Here, lab and industry manufactured creatures, although everything has been toxified, right? You see it also in Oryx and Crake. So posthumanist Anthropocene fiction is interested in planetary precarity. And allow me to reiterate the point I have made before, that while the interest is in the local conditions, the local incidents, a good posthumanist novel, climate change Anthropocene novels, will show that whatever is happening in a particular locality, in a particular locale, is not originating there but originates elsewhere. Which means, although the scale of the local is just a particular town, the novelists show that whatever is happening in that town comes from somewhere else, but also that this town contributes to the expansion of the problem to somewhere else. So it's impossible to think of completely segregated places. You're looking at a condition where there are multiple demands, right? And whatever has happened, like the instances we have looked at, you do not know what has happened elsewhere, but you are also affected. That is planetary precarity. So planetary precarity is not necessarily global nuclear war. No, not at all. Planetary precarity is the precariousness of your lives and mine in our specific villages or cities because something has happened elsewhere. So we lead, as in the humans lead lives in a particular locality with the assumption that we are away from the world. No, not quite the case, right? So planetary precarity is a mixture of the local and the global, a scaling up of the global, local into the global. It emphasizes a relational, and you can please see this as a summary. Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction also looks at a relational and connected identity of all life forms, which causes us to rethink the relationship between, or relationships between the living and the non-living, but also the hierarchy between the non-living and living. Posthumanist Anthropocene fiction rejects the idea of techno-utopia. They say it is not feasible. It's not feasible. It sometimes calls for rethinking the relationship in terms of rewilding, bringing back the extinct species. It looks at the ethics of creating post-natural worlds. Is it all right to create worlds like that? Is it all right to, with the use of capitalism, with the use of technology and humanity, construct an artificial place which we then call the wilderness? Okay, so the debate here is actually between not just the local and the global of different scales, but the ethics of setting aside land as land for the animals. The human forest dweller might wonder, all right, as to, is this wilderness at all? Now, if you go back to your classic work on the subject, which would be Jurassic Park, the attempt is to bring back dinosaurs and create a wilderness sanctuary, right? They're calling it a park, yes. Except that the dinosaurs lived in a time when they were the biggest predators on Earth. Most of the dinosaurs were vegetarian. Okay. Assuming that the breeding of the dinosaurs is successful, the question you have to ask is the world of the Jurassic Park now a replica of the world they inhabited before humans came? The answer is very definitely no. So here is wilderness, here is animal sanctuary, but both created by the active collaboration between science, technology, and human capital. So posthumanist Anthropocene fiction also wonders about the ethics of creating supposed national parks, and that in most cases the national park is emergent due to the conjunction that we have been speaking about, and the conjunction sometimes does not work, which is of course the premise of Jurassic Park, that when you put the dinosaurs into an environment saying, oh, this is what they ate, this is how they lived, The point is, are you sure? And as you can see from the over dramatic Spielberg presentation, that you have to somehow control even the wilderness. So the wilderness has been created and controlled. The animals there are built by us and natural. The post-natural is a mixture of these. We shall continue this exploration in our next session.